Brilliant. Well, I'm going to do one wrap-up question, and I'm going to get an answer off all of you. So the question actually comes through from Dilip, and the question is, his comment actually is, what resonates for me is the commitment to honest journalism. How can we encourage the publishing industry, the tech companies, and perhaps the government to deliver positive change? So it would be really good to hear from each of you what positive change and action, or what that could look like, what that could feel like. And I'm going to start with you, Rebecca. What's your best thinking on this question?
For me, I think it's about investing in journalists. I think there's been a real hollowing out of local newsrooms and national newsrooms to some extent over the years, and you really need to start there with well-trained journalists that are representative of the communities that they serve, and also, you know, to be the change you want to be. So at the BMJ, we have a set of ethical editorial principles. We have an ethics advisory committee, and we developed our own code of conduct for journalism. And we're also engaged in a long-term effort to be free of industry influence, for example, banning formula milk advertising in the journal. So sort of, you know, actually not being afraid to be quite activists in a space as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Nick, over to you.
Big question. I think, you know, I mean, I could talk about publishers and the things that publishers should do, and we've discussed much of this. You know, it's about diversity, it's about improving standards, it's about accuracy, it's about avoiding the mistakes of the past. It's about, you know, really responsible journalism, investigating, exposing false information, all of those kind of things journalism can do better. But I think on its own, that won't be enough. You know, I think also, you know, the platforms need to do a much better job, and journalists need to really pressure platforms to do a better job in terms of promoting quality news and really trying to come up with ways of giving people stuff that is relevant and not just popular, and really valuable to them. And I think also governments have a duty to act, to provide more clarity on content that is harmful and what platforms should do about that content, but not necessarily illegal. And obviously we do have sort of legislation pending, but we need to get to a place where the rules are clearer, where the platforms know what they have to do. And we do those two things, basically. We improve the quality of journalism, mainstream journalism and specialist journalism, at the same time as improving the quality of information within the platforms that people are obviously going to use and still love.
So we've heard from Rebecca about investing in quality journalists, investing in quality platforms and content. Over to you, Riyad. What's your thinking?
I think it's a very difficult topic to tackle, because while producing higher quality content and using journalists who are not biased, having news publications that have no political agendas or influence, it is all very much, you know, stepping in the right direction. It doesn't remove that subjectivity from the consuming public. And ultimately, the issue we have right now is, even with something like NewsGuard, which is really important, what they're doing is incredibly important, for a huge swathe of consumers out there, that will just be seen as another way of their voices being silenced. It will be seen as another reason not to believe mainstream media, whether it's true or not, because it doesn't align with their agenda, and it also almost does align with their worldview that they're being put upon and they're being ignored, and so on and so forth. So I think it's a far more difficult, a far more nuanced problem than simply producing better quality content that's been fact-checked, that has no political bias, because how do we convince people to then accept that? You know, as we stand, unfortunately, you know, however we like to think of ourselves, whether it's enlightened liberals or what have you, unfortunately, the usual response we have to the other pole of opinion is to almost ridicule people for those beliefs, for not seeing the truth or what have you. That's not solving anything. That's not making, you know, 70 million Trump supporters believe what we know to be true. It's just making them hate us more for not believing what they believe. So, I mean, I wouldn't know where to start right now, because, you know, we could reshape mainstream media to have no political affiliations, no agendas, be completely transparent and make sure every story is 100% fact checked. That doesn't mean that a huge proportion of the population isn't going to ignore it.
Over to you, Anna-Sophie.
Yeah, so I think I totally agree. NewsGuard is not the end-all be-all solution. I think that the best thing that we can all do right now is on all of our different social media accounts to go and follow 10 news outlets that you vehemently disagree with, so that when you log on, you're not just seeing news that you know that you're already going to agree with, but you actually will see the news as it's presented by the other side. And I have to say, one thing that has really benefited me, I think, over the last 3 years, and everyone that works at NewsGuard, is that I have to actually spend a lot of time reading news and speaking to people who run news outlets whose views I don't necessarily agree with. And I think part of the issue is that over the last couple of decades, our news and information ecosystems are essentially created to present different versions of reality for every single person when they log on. And you see this, right? When I go and follow a bunch of anti-vax accounts, and then Facebook says, okay, here's a couple of anti-maskers and anti-lockdown and COVID is a hoax people. And all of a sudden, logging on in the morning, I can completely see how someone thinks the government has made up coronavirus and is using it to take away our freedoms and is killing us with 5G towers. And if that's what you see day after day, and you're conversing with people who believe the same thing, that becomes your version of reality. The thing that NewsGuard is also trying to do, besides empower consumers, is that we're doing loads of research and producing reports on the ways in which the platforms are, from a product design perspective, actually prioritize misinformation over credible news. And we can see sort of in the 6 months leading up to the Capitol riots that if you wanted to get as much engagement as possible on Facebook, your best bet was to be publishing far-right misinformation. Far-right misinformation outperformed far-right credible information, which outperformed all other types. And I think to solve the problem, I think we cannot be afraid, and by we, I mean the industry, but also governments cannot be afraid to take on the platforms in a way that challenges their underlying business model. And I think when we look at something like the UK's online harms bill and changes in the US, it will all be window dressing if we do not approach the underlying issues at stake, which is that there are platforms who are currently profiting off of the spreading of misinformation and divisive content over what we would consider to be, credible, authoritative content, especially when it comes to issues like democracy and a coronavirus pandemic.
Ria's put in the chat box, really good point, Anna-Sophie. Exposing ourselves to diverse media outlets is just absolutely just so important, and seeing different people's points of view is just so important as well, rather than getting caught up in our own silos. Kemi, over to you, and we'll just have one last sort of thought and reflection from you.
I just wanted to pick up on what Rebecca said about investment, because that is a huge point, especially for us as a small organisation. The quality of our work only improves the more we can actually just do the work, because it's our full-time job, and that's the main change we've been able to see. And journalists are time poor, which means that sometimes they aggregate news stories without even thinking about whether it's true. It's just something that is everywhere, and so that's how you see fake stories get published again and again on online ads. And I've seen that happen in real time, just because people are too stressed out to check whether something is actually true in my other jobs. And I was also thinking from a Ghanaian perspective for the answer to this question. Sometimes it's really good to understand the issues within your bubble and the role that you play, because sometimes there are things that we do disagree with our readers. For example, you mentioned anti-vaxxing, Anna, and like vaccine hesitancy is huge in our community, but not necessarily something that every single editor agrees with. So it's like thinking about how we can constantly learn and think about our audience, how we can be of value and present information to them that is balanced, that they might not be getting through, you know, WhatsApp conversations where a lot of this anti-vax sentiment seems to be spreading in Black communities. And that's something that we do to try and, like, you know, readdress lack of truth in our community. And just having a mission and values that underpins our work, like transparency and accountability, and holding our hands up when we get things wrong, and also listening when our readers shout at us, as they often like to do. If there's something that has, you know, upset people, we'll try and think about why that is, and we'll try and think about how we can do better next time. And yeah, we just all get into this game because we're curious people. So if what we want is, you know, a truthful, balanced industry, then constantly upskilling and constantly, you know, thinking about how to improve is kind of crucial. Otherwise, why do we even bother going through this? It's not a particularly relaxing industry.
Well, look, I have found this the most exciting, inspiring, and thought-provoking conversation. I know our listeners have as well. I can hear an echo of myself, but never mind. And it's we were just also all watching dawn break over in the States. It's looking beautiful out there today. So thank you so much for joining us. And look, a massive thank you to the panelists. You've all just, you know, like I said, given us some great insights and fantastic things to be thinking about on a Thursday morning as we go out of lockdown. And I think, you know, so many actions, so many takeaways, so many things to do. And obviously, everybody should be downloading and using NewsGuard. Everyone should be definitely going to look at Galdem, the BMJ, for their sources. Riyadh, thank you for all your comments on content. And Nick, thank you for all your great insights. So it's been just a really thought-provoking and brilliant session this morning.